Hello, good evening. Evening, thanks for joining. Can everyone hear me? Good, thank you. Welcome back, I would assume. There we go. Thanks very much for joining. My name is Matt Carlson. I'm the co-chair, thanks Boris, of DEF with Sean Elby from Vancouver Economic. Thank you for attending Vancouver's premier networking forum for technology entrepreneurs, and especially big thanks to everyone who is new to the tonight. Our events are organized by our board and our events committee. Tonight's event could not be possible without Dorothy Keenan from FutureWorks and Keith Spencer from Fasken. Give those guys a big round of applause. And tonight, I'm very pleased to announce we have a new sponsor. So big thank you to BCIC, the BC Innovation Council. I would like to invite William Johnson up to speak. And William, after you. Thank God. Hey, thanks a lot, guys, for having us here. We're really excited to be a sponsor of the Vancouver Economic Forum. The turnout here tonight shows us that we're backing a really passionate, engaged community, so that's really exciting for us. So quickly about BCIC. So we're a crown agency of the province of British Columbia. A lot of you might know us, but I quickly wanted to talk about, why we would be coming to BCIC, or, how tech entrepreneurs can leverage the services that we provide. And I want to mention very quickly 2 programs that we offer. So you're coming to BCIC, you're likely a tech startup or you're a large company, and you're looking for resources to grow your business. So that might be, talent, that might be resources, that might be hiring grants, or you're looking for access to new markets. We can help you with that. It might also be a large organization, so that might be like government or a large industry tech player, and you're looking to adopt, tech solutions, to help you grow efficiencies or whatever, gain a competitive advantage. And so we're going to match you with made in BC technology solutions. The other scenario you might be coming to us would be if you were, a foreign entity, so a foreign government or, foreign delegates or international tech company. And you want to explore what innovation is in British Columbia. Well, we know innovation in British Columbia like the back of our hands, and we're gonna be happy to show you around the tech ecosystem here. So those are the 3 reasons why you'd probably come to us. And so I quickly want to mention the BC Tech Co-op Grants Program. And so that is a $2,700 grant that we're going to give to companies or nonprofits in British Columbia that have 99 employees or less. And if you're hiring a co-op student, basically, in a tech role, or if you're a tech company, obviously. And so the other thing I want to mention is BCIC Ignites. That's a new program we have. So if you are, industry working with academics, basically, and you're working on a solution for a significant industry problem in British Columbia, and it's focused on natural resources and applied sciences, we're going to give you up to $300,000 potentially to help bring that research project to market, essentially, to commercialize it. So that's the BCIC Ignite program. So there's a few folks here in the 3rd row. You can wave at everyone. They can talk to you about how you can get this money. So if you have time later, go talk to these folks. Again, we're really happy to be a sponsor of this community, and I'm really excited for the panel. So thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great night. That's awesome. Thanks, William. One more sponsor to mention. We typically highlight one sponsor per event of our season sponsors, Fasken Martineau, who are big in the legal community and technology. We have quite the delegation tonight. Sharuz, Ariel, Karem, Keith Spencer's not with us tonight, but see either of those 3 in the lobby if you have questions about Fasken and what they can offer. Next up, just wanted to thank all of our sponsors. I think we have everyone up there. These are people who've sponsored us throughout the year and supported us, in some cases for many, many years, 10 to 20. So thank you to them, and we'll just leave that up as we, perfect, those are titles, as we move to our lightning pitches. So for those of you who are new, we typically do lightning pitches. That would be a 100-second pitch where we invite an entrepreneur to come up and pitch us on their idea, their business. They might be raising funds and so on. Nancy Mott from Vancouver Economic will be introducing our lightning pitchers. Nancy?
Thank you very much. So here we are, VR. I think we're in the middle of a once-in-a-lifetime disruption. It includes disrupting in storytelling, hardware, software, marketing, and distribution. In entertainment, we'll be influencing our movie watching as we physically move through stories and interact with characters. It'll change the way we interact with video games as we become active participants and create user-generated content. It'll be part of our technology and science and simulating dangerous jobs. And every day we'll be working on social interactions through VR and also how we purchase items. It's been estimated by 2020 the AR/VR will be about $150 billion industry. And I think the success of this in Vancouver will be because of talent. We need game designers, we need interface specialists, seasoned animators, content creators, and storytellers. And I think with our 30-year legacy in visual effects, animation, film, and games, which is what my sector is, I think we're ready to be super successful on this. And we work really hard at the VEC on the talent side. So we're always trying to promote talent worldwide. We're trying to acquire talent and bring Canadians back to Canada. So I think we're very ready. And speaking of talent, I would like to introduce you to the first lightning pitch, which is Kim Hansen from Signal FM. And I think do we have 100 seconds on the clock for Kim, or how do we? Good luck, honey.
Right, hey VR guys, say hi.
Hi.
I am Kim Hansen. I am the CEO and a co-founder at Signal FM. Signal FM is the world's first social spoken word blogging platform, what we're calling Twitch for podcast. Okay, podcast is exploding in popularity, but right now it's really hard to create, really hard to find, really hard to monetize. So what we're doing is we're making it easy for anyone to hop in there and immediately be podcasting with their friends around the world. Live listening audiences can jump in there and actually speak in real time to their favorite content creators, close the whole thing down, save it in one social ecosystem for remix and upvoting. We transcribe the whole thing with IBM Watson, so your conversation is now Googleable. Okay. How do we make money? Same way podcast is already making money. A listener support and ad support model. Twitch made $890 million last year with this model. Okay. Team, between the four of us, we've shipped hundreds of millions of dollars of entertainment software, primarily in the game space. We know how to make good products that are fun and work. Okay. What are we looking for? We've been getting organic signups every week, despite the fact that I do exactly nothing to encourage that at this moment. We want to continue that trend. Head to Signal FM, sign up for early access. You're first in line when we launch in a couple of months. We are actively starting to look for investment at $650,000 Canadian. If you're an investor, come talk to me afterwards. I'll be doing demos. Thank you so much.
Thank you. But no mic drop. Wasn't the mic? No, I was kidding. Okay, so the second pitch is Noam Kenning of VOA Imaging Technology.
Okay. So VOA is a world 360-degree camera designed specifically for unmanned vehicle. What does that mean? Current solution right now using drone, you're using different kind of cameras, like off-the-shelf cameras, like GoPro or like a fisheye lens. And the problem with that, they're not really designed for unmanned vehicle. So if you split the category to two parts, like a two technology, you have like the fisheye, which actually use like a fish lens, and you get really pixelated the farther away you get from the camera. And you have another one, it's going to be like multiple cameras. You're going to stitch the cameras, and you're going to have a lot more processing power to get a really decent footage. Now, even with the latest and greatest Facebook algorithms and camera, you can actually visually see, like, this just posted like a week ago, I think, some corruption in the footage, and that's because the stitching is still not there. You still have problem with stitching. Then we decided, we work actually this type of a similar technology. We actually managed to create our own camera, which, here you go. which is a little bit different. What's different about it is, first of all, designed for unmanned vehicles. So it's capturing 360-degree footage. There's no mechanical moving parts. It's you communicate automatically with autopilot. It's not only a camera, it's also your sensor. So you actually be using image processing at the same time you're actually getting the footage. So there is no necessarily like extra sensors that you actually need to add to the camera. Now, how are we able to do it? Let's talk about spiders. Using the same kind of technology like jumping spider used to see the world. Jumping spider use two sets of eyes. You have like one high resolution eye set and you have like low resolution eye set that actually cover the whole thing all together to see the world as one big picture. It's actually called super resolution, and this is exactly our camera. Here. So we have like in the center we have like a 4K sensor, global shutter. We have like another 4 cameras, monochrome black and white cameras that supporting the whole footage, and we're able to use this type of new category of camera for machine vision, improved machine vision, and also for getting really decent footage. Amazing footage, actually. So this is actually pictures that we took a week ago. Hopefully none of you actually know the person that's out there. And we actually, by using our algorithm, we actually managed to improve the footage and double the amount of pixels. From a 4K sensor, we actually managed to get 8K resolution. So this is about it. We actually now working with collaboration with some very big major drone manufacturers for military and commercial applications, and we are looking actually to people. We are actually expanding now. We need to speed up our process and our development team. So if you machine vision programmer or know about drones and want to join us, so please send us your resume. And that's it. My name is Noam Koenig. I'm the CEO and founder of VIOR. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, back to you, Matthew.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Great pitches. So tonight, as you see, virtual reality is changing the world as we know it. Just wanted to call attention to our hashtag VEF virtual reality. Our volunteers will have microphones, and if you'd like to tweet at them, Instagram, what have you, they can answer questions live. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mac Flavell. If you don't know Mac, he's one of the most dynamic moderators, hosts, speakers, Vancouver personalities that I think we've seen. So Mac is going to be moderating us tonight and introducing the panelists. Woo! Mac, over to you. There we go.
Hi.
Hi.
All right. So I could be at home with my daughter. I could be here with you. I chose to be here with you, and I just hide you, and 3 of you replied. So let's do that again. Hi. Still a little under par. So here's what I'm going to do. I got Snapchat on my phone. I'm about to Snapchat you guys. I'm about to brag about how cool it is when I'm hosting this VEF panel. I want you guys to lose your mind, okay? So when my camera goes by, you're going to be like, yeah! That's what I want you to do. And I got the mic, so I kind of have some say in this. Okay, here we go. We're Snapchatting. Oh! That's good. Thank you. Okay, let's get my panel up here. All 4 of you come on up. All 4 of you come on up. You could follow me on Snapchat if you wanted to know what that looked like. My name is Max Lavelle. I chose to sit in the middle specifically because I think it's more interesting than sitting on the outside. My job is not to be the person who talks most tonight. That is honestly very hard for me. I like to talk a lot. I like the sound of my own voice. But I know 3 of these 4 people for about a decade. One of them is a new friend. And they're all probably smarter than I am. So you're here to hear them talk, not me. I'm going to be the platform upon which they dance. They are going to discuss VR, AR, MR, 360 video, the future as we know it. And I would like you all to realize that most of them have children at home they could spend their times with. So a huge round of applause for these people. We're going to do some introductions to start with. We're going to start on my right. Make yourself sound good. Don't be all like humble about this. Explain to these people why you're on stage. We're going to start with Ryan. We're going to work this way.
Sure. Hi. Hello. My name's Ryan. I've been in the tech industry forever. Most recently, kind of moved into the game industry and started to build out a tool set for storytelling. And this tool set actually started its life, Motive.io, as a location-based tool set. But one of the things we've been finding in the last little while is that it's actually a perfect fit for virtual reality. And it was actually a visit to the Roadhouse office last year that completely changed my mind. I'm by nature an extremely skeptical person when it comes to technology. I think everything new sucks for the most part. But VR was one of the first things that came along that really, really blew my mind and made me truly think that we're on the cusp of something pretty amazing. So we're building out tools that help people make VR content, and happy to elaborate on that in person. But that's how I ended up here.
Hi, my name is Eric Hine. I'm an executive producer at Archaeact Interactive. I've been in games for about 10 years, about a year in VR. I've been super excited about it. My company has been doing VR for about 3 years now. We started off with Little Lamper, one of the first cardboard games.
Most downloaded cardboard game of all time, I believe.
First most downloaded cardboard game of all times. Yes, that's true. Among other things, we're putting it on all platforms now. So we work on the HTC Vive, Google Cardboard. We do a lot of China publishing. We do a lot of B2B solutions. So if you have an app, we're always interested in talking, and we're always hiring. So we're looking for that. Thanks.
My name is Mac. I'm your moderator this evening. I run Hammer and Tusk. Hammer and Tusk started out as a VR newsletter because I became obsessed with VR. I couldn't build it, so I just started marketing about it. I started talking about it. Last year I got picked up by Axiom Zen. They are a venture studio here in Vancouver who are building extraordinary software. They wanted to start building extraordinary VR, and so the partnership between us has made a lot of sense.
I'm Tarny Williams. I'm one of the founders, the president, and the COO of Roadhouse Interactive. I've been in the games industry for about 27 years. About 14 years of that
Tarny.
with EA, with Distinctive Software, both here and in Los Angeles with EA. Was the general manager of THQ Canada. Roadhouse is a 170-person local studio, homegrown. And we've primarily been focused on mobile for the last 5 years, but we're massive VR fans, and so we're have a whole VR initiative in studio going. We're working on a number of different titles. Recently actually built a mixed reality streaming studio with green screen, and actually opened it up to the community. So if anybody wants to come in and do some mixed reality streaming, that's available. And so yeah, we're working on a variety of different VR titles currently for a variety of platforms, really sort of both full room scale HTC Vive kind of 6 degrees of freedom stuff, as well as the more mobile focused Samsung and now Google.
Hi everyone, my name is Dora Chang and I'm a co-founder at Euphorus VR. I was only in the game industry for about 8 years before I made the switch over. We started doing VR just before Facebook bought Oculus, and a few months later, we officially incorporated. What we've done is we've built our own video game engine, actually. And but after we built it, we were like, what are we going to do with it? So we started looking for actual problems to solve. So right now we focus a lot on B2B stuff, and a lot of our use cases actually come from real estate. So we hear a lot about how virtual reality could help, and what are some of the things that they would like to see in terms of spaces, and so on and so forth. And it's really great to see such a full house today. I still remember the days when we first started. I would go to meetups and I would tell people that I'm in virtual reality, and they would go, "What?" So we've definitely come a long way since then.
That was the perfect tangent to what we're going to do next. So I'm going to ask the panelists a couple questions, but I'm also going to ask the audience a couple questions, and your responses to these questions are going to dictate how the rest of the night proceeds. So first, the panelists, how many of you have worked in video games? Hands up. Hands up. Oh, shit. Notice that, right? Virtual reality is coming out of video games. How many of you have worked at EA in Vancouver area? So that's interesting, right? We talk about the boom and bust cycles of video games. We talk about the nature of these giant companies planting their seeds locally, growing into big oak trees, spilling out more seeds and more growing. It turns out EA maybe was good for business for VR in Vancouver. Now I want to ask the audience a couple questions. I want to ask you, how many of you have used VR ever? Hand up. And this is for the people on the panel, right? This is going to set the tone for us. So how many of you have used VR in the last week? How many of you used VR more than 5 times? How many of you know the difference between AR and VR? How many of you think there's a difference between 360 video and VR? Okay, cool. So let's get.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah,
How many of
jump
you
in.
have used Room Scale VR?
Ooh. So how many of your put your hand up if you used VR. Put your hand up like high. Let me see it if you've used a VR. Now put your hand down if your only VR experience is with Cardboard. Okay, so most of you have actually tried some interesting form of VR. No, that's not meant to be like a slag against Cardboard. Cardboard's amazing. It's just that it's not. Ask Google and Daydream. It's not the future, right? Nobody thought Cardboard was what we were going to be doing in 10 years. It's what we're doing today, which is interesting. So let's start off with a question to the panel. And so I know a little bit about VR, but I have a question, and this is an honest question for me. Like I honestly want to know all of your opinions. Please define the difference between mixed reality and augmented reality. And before we do that, maybe whoever goes first can talk about VR versus AR, and then the rest of you can talk about AR versus mixed reality. And I don't know is very much a valid answer to this question. Let's start with Dora this time.
So, okay, the way I see it, difference between VR and AR is you are completely in a different world. It could be the real world, it could be a 360 video or a 360 photo of the Louvre or something, but you're completely immersed in it. Whereas AR, you still see most of real life. I still see all of you, in the same room with me, but it could be augmented, hence augmented reality, with additional information. So when I met Mac again, for example, this is embarrassing. I actually don't remember that we used to sit beside each other at EA. So an augmented reality glasses would have been really, really helpful in that case. So building upon that, in terms of mixed reality, I don't think there's like an actual agreed upon definition, but I like to think of mixed reality as you can go back and forth. Because right now there's no way you can go back and forth, right? You would take a picture, take a video, and then you would add something on it. It's baked, for example, but if it's mixed reality, you can actually switch between the two of them seamlessly. So that's how I choose to interpret it.
You don't need to talk just to hear your own voice, but if you have anything to add to what Doris said, definitely jump in here, gentlemen. Tarny, you're next.
Sure. I'd throw a few things in there. I think certainly for me, mixed reality is the ability, and I think Magic Leap are a company that is kind of really pushing this forward, is where their technology is adding elements to your view of the real world where you're unable to discern whether they are real or not. And so, that's one way of looking at it. Another way is sort of the term we've used with the green screen side is, we're utilizing it where via a green screen, we're allowing us to place you inside a virtual world. Again, sort of in the flip side, essentially taking a real world object and placing it in a virtual scene. So sort of blending the two in a way that's at least fairly seamless. And again, I guess the other point that you made on 360 video, for me, I kind of differentiate between 360 video and virtual reality, and that I feel like 360 video it's a different experience than virtual reality, in the sense that for me, virtual reality is we've taken you somewhere else, whereas 360 video kind of feel like, I guess it's VR in a way, but it's also depending on if you for me, it's like if you can't move around in that scene somewhere else where you are, then I feel like you're not really in a virtual environment. You're looking at 360 video, whereas if you're able to actually, essentially, and some of this technology doesn't even exist really. If you're able to be in another place where you're actually, it's fine, maybe it's video, but you can now move around and translocate yourself in that scene, then I feel like that's a virtual reality. Because in real reality, you can always move in different places.
For me, my definition of AR versus VR has typically been AR is something that's overlaid on top of reality, but mixed reality, I've always looked at it as something that's more aware of the environment. So things like the HoloLens scans the environment and knows where things are and where it's occluded. And so it's using both reality to augment it as well. Same with Magic Leap. They seem to understand where there's physical objects and how to occlude those objects and stuff. So I always defined it as augmented reality is stuff you would see more like Google Glass, where it's actually just over top of things. It may be aware of the environment, but it's not utilizing the environment to change how it's displaying stuff to you. It's not aware of the corner of a wall or a table or a chair or a desk. And then a mixed reality will actually be aware of those physical objects, and it's actually including those in how it's displaying it or where it's positioning it.
Yeah, I don't think I can elaborate much on that. The first time I heard mixed reality was actually at a HoloLens demo at GDC a couple of years ago. And as far as the presenter there was concerned, he was inventing it on stage. I think that one of the things for me, when it comes to this industry, is that I feel like terminology is having a hard time keeping up with the advancements, and that we're going to be throwing around a lot of terms that don't have concrete meanings, and it's going to be a lot of kind of percolating while we decide what these things actually mean. But I do agree, and I think at the time, Microsoft was really trying to make a distinction between what Google Glass was doing and what they were doing with HoloLens, and it was really that difference between, adding information to a scene as opposed to literally overlaying a new reality on top of what was in front of you.
How many people in the audience think they kind of followed that? Hands up. Cool. We're doing good so far. Next question. I want the panel and the audience to put their hands up on this. How many of you think that VR is going to fundamentally transform the human experience? I'm glad you guys do. I do too, by the way. And a bunch of you don't. So one of the questions, we had a call before we did this panel, and we said, what are some questions you're going to ask? And one of the hard questions I have that I'm just going to open with, because I don't have an answer to this, is how is the accountant's professional life going to be affected by VR? Actually, I talked to my accountant about this. So I have a little bit of an answer, but I want to see if anybody else has any kind of input on how VR or AR, whatever you want to call it, is going to affect the accountant's life. How many of you are accountants? Raise your hands. Yeah, one of you. 1, 2. Good. So this is for you. This is for the two of you. Let's start on this side this time.
Sure. So I think from my standpoint, I think it's really easy, and especially when you look at the makeup of the panel here today, to see VR primarily as an entertainment experience, as an extension of gaming or other forms of media delivery. But I think one of my really kind of seminal moments with VR was I was experimenting with, I don't remember, something we were building or something else. And I sat down at my computer and I couldn't believe how limited it felt. All of a sudden, I went from this environment where I was able to interact with everything that I was seeing into something where everything I was trying to do was pasted onto two little screens that didn't have any depth and didn't really give me any meaningful way to interact with it. And I think that moment, it was actually a visceral reaction. It wasn't just I didn't just kind of think, oh, gee, wouldn't it be better? I actually got really annoyed at how limited my computer felt all of a sudden. And I think that was the moment when I really realized, we're not just talking about an entertainment platform. I think we're talking about a fundamentally new way of interacting with technology, and putting aside all of the media and entertainment. And obviously, I think that's going to be the first huge explosion. I want to use the first VR, AR computer interface. I want to use it not just because I think it's going to be cool, but because I think it's fundamentally going to make my job easier to do. And so I think that's why everybody should be interested in it, because I really think that when you get a chance to experience it, especially some of the room scale stuff, especially when you're not just your head, but the rest of your body has agency in the scene, all of a sudden, every other way we interact with technology is going to seem extremely limited.
Yeah, I think it's going to fundamentally change too many things, and that's it's almost a good thing in the sense of like the way the personal computer changed the way we did business. Ultimately, from an accountant standpoint, you're going to go in there and you're going to meet clients in VR in the future. You're going to be hiring people. You're going to go for training and education in VR. You're not going to have to leave your house. As the technology gets better over the next 5 years, we hit a second or third generation headset out. These things are going to be very comfortable, and you're not going to have to leave the comfort of your own home. You can, but it's much easier to conduct business now from a computer anywhere in the world. You can have an entire accounting firm that all operates entirely in VR as a remote office. And maybe you don't go into the VR office all the time, but you can, and that's where you conduct a lot of your business. You might present your clients, all their data and spreadsheets now inside virtual space on giant walls, a little bit, but not quite like the Minority Report. You have all this control. You can bring up data and visualizations in all kinds of new ways. I think, not to go too deep, but that's just a snippet of the things that'll ultimately affect the way an accountant is going to end up doing business in VR.
I'm going to jump on this one very quickly. I went to see my accountant this year, and it was obviously the end of April because I'm that guy and my accountant hates me. But I walked into his office at the end of April, and this is the only time I see him every year. He's not my best friend. He's just a cool guy. And historically, his office has looked, like a bomb went off, right? There's stacks of folders and files everywhere and all these things. And I walked into his office and there was nothing. And I said, "Dude, what happened to April? Are you going out of business?" And he said, No. We went paperless. Like we don't have to have those files anymore. And I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. Like that's great for the environment." But your personal sense of progress is gone. I mean, it was good when you used to have literally stacks of folders in your office. And as you work through the month of April, the hell that you have signed up to professionally, you reduce the size of those folders and those stacks of papers, and the office became more clean. That visual representation of the work that you do. In my own case, I used to shovel gravel for a living. And I gave this example the other day at Eric's conference. Eric threw a conference the other day that I gave an example at. And I said, when I'm shoveling gravel, if every time I shoveled a shovel full of gravel, I saw a little virtual dollar bill appear, that would have made shoveling gravel more compelling. Because shoveling gravel is not compelling as it is. But if I see like ching, 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 every time, that's good stuff. So for me, the idea of virtually representing your work, even if you don't need it to be there, but virtually representing your work so that you understand your progress through it across industries is interesting.
I think VR is certainly going to massively change screen-based industries. So, right now we've been getting bigger and bigger monitors. As soon as you get some pretty solid VR glasses, and then beyond glasses, contacts, beyond that, just having nanotech on the inside, and that's all probably the next 10 years. Like, stuff's going to go so fast, it's crazy. Screens go away. You don't need screens. Business travel mostly goes away. I mean, right now you can be in a virtual experience with another person where you're interacting with that person, and you can move around a room. And if that's mapped, say, to a boardroom table with chairs in it that are in fixed locations in 2 physical locations, you can both be in those locations and move around and interact with people like you're in the same room on different parts of the planet. And that, changes a huge number of the ways that you have any sort of a business interaction. And I think that that's going to, radically change the way people get together, because it beats the crap out of Skype and Google Hangouts. I mean, all these things they're just terrible. So to your point about, as soon as you went into VR and came back to the limited reality, you just have a giant spreadsheet wall around, and, oh yeah, we need one of these, and we'll talk about this, and you'll dive over here. I mean, it really is, that much more powerful in terms of the ability to manipulate information all around you and engage another person or a team of people into that and bring them into it.
I think virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality actually is it's fundamentally a way to communicate reality the way that it's meant to be communicated. So it doesn't have to be a 360 video. That's just one example. It could be your artistic vision of what a space should look like as well. So if we take a very simple example like real estate, right? For my clients, it could be like, this is what the space looks like. This is literally how, the hallway flows into the living room, flows into the bedroom, right? But for my clients, just able to look at, say, some analytics information in 3D, it tells them, okay, so for some reason my tenants really like the kitchen. We did a great job on the kitchens. We hear use cases like looking at how an eyeball, diseases in the eyeballs progress, and you don't have to. It actually is really helpful, apparently, for ophthalmologists to be able to see it and just to look at it. And this is where room scale really comes in, is they can look at it and really examine it from every angle and how an eyeball actually changes instead of sitting there and dragging your mouse around. So, or education I studied mathematics when I was in school. And I know that calculus, for example, something that helps me visualize the scale of these different equations, that would have been really helpful. I went on to do 3D development without learning any of that, but it would have been great if it was something like that. So I think it may not be very obvious right now why everybody should care, but I can see how probably not in a very distant future, we're probably using VR to talk to each other, not just from a social, not just to hang out, but to have actual teleconference. Imagine that you're able to write on a whiteboard, with your team over in Japan, in France, in Germany, right? So VR, it could be applicable, I think, to many, many different cases, but the technology probably needs to catch up to our imagination and to our use cases.
So I've, at some point, some poor employer of mine put me through a communications training course or something. And in the course of this training course, I was given a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, there was an abstract picture. It included triangles and circles and squares and lines of different shapes and colors. And then the communication test was with only me seeing this picture, I would describe it to Eric, and Eric would have to recreate the picture as I had described it. But he doesn't get to see my picture, right? It's me telling him, okay, in the top left corner there's this thing, in the bottom right corner there's this thing. Microsoft with their HoloLens has run a bunch of experiments against this. And they didn't literally use the picture drawing, but it was essentially the same idea. And they found that versus, so they were using the room-to-room thing, which is kind of like AR, Skype, projection, hologram things. They found that communication efficiency was significantly increased in augmented reality over telephone and over Skype. It wasn't as good as real life. There's nothing as good as real life yet. But arguably that will come, because when I want to discuss with you anything at all, and I don't have to describe it, but we can both look at it, whether I'm an accountant or I'm a lawyer or I'm a building manager or I'm a whatever you want, but when we don't have to describe the abstract because the abstract exists as a visual representation between us, communication is more efficient. And I don't actually totally see that bubbling over to accountants yet, but soon. Let's talk about your favorite headset so far. So just so everybody understands the big sort of paradigm in VR, different than what we talked about with AR and stuff. But the big paradigm in VR is mobile VR. So mobile VR is where you take your phone, you drop it into some kind of face mask, and then your phone works as a VR device with the limitation that it doesn't know where you are in the room. This is what they're talking about, room scale VR. You've got these head-mounted displays that are powered, and they know where you are in the room. So whether it's because you've made a bunch of money on one of these, or you see it's the early adoption method for the next 100 million people use VR, or just because you had the best experience. I'm not giving you the scale to measure it on, but I just want to ask you, what is your favorite VR AR headset so far? And when you hear yours called out, you guys are allowed to call the same one, but the first time you hear yours called out, your favorite called out, I want you to applaud the person who said it. We're going to start with Dora.
Can I cheat?
Yes.
I think the gamer in me, my favorite is the Vive, the room scale. But the business side of things tells me it's mobile because it's a lot less friction. It's a lot easier for me to transport, to show my clients. It's a lot easier for my clients to show their clients. So, but room scale is, if you're looking for that premium, wham, this is what VR's promise is, it's definitely room scale. Bye.
Yeah, what she said. I mean, first for me, I'd been in the Oculus and I, knew what mobile was coming. But the first time I tried the HTC Vive in room scale was the moment where I guess I get to decide. So I was like, okay, we have a VR division now, and we've got people working on it, because it was that much of a transformational experience for me. So I mean, I think it was the next day. We're like, okay, and now we got people on it because I'm a COO. I get to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's such a delta for me when you're able to actually be in another place and you can move around. And I mean, I've been a VR nut since I was a kid. Pre-Lawnmower Man days, I've always read sci-fi and always read all of those things. So the ideas and the visualization's been in my head forever. And I played the pterodactyl game, Dactyl Terror, or whatever it was called. I don't know. Anybody here play that?
No hands.
No, this
no
is.
hands.
Anyway, ever go into the BattleTech simulators in Chicago or anything like that? Anyone? No. Okay. So I mean, some of this stuff's been around for years, and it's terrible, just awful. And yet, even now, like the HTC Vive and the systems we're on, we are practically just past the phone equivalent of 2 tin cans and a piece of string. We're not even really at the big brick cell phone yet. I mean, this is It has just started, and it is going to go at a pace faster than the smartphone did, if you can sort of think about that. And so the smartphone, I don't know how long that's been. I mean, when did those come out? Apple released the iPhone in 2007.
Seven, yeah.
So we are not yet 10 years on. Who here does not have a smartphone?
Oh, hey, one guy.
One guy. All right, so we got one person who doesn't have a smartphone. And that story will be repeated pretty much around the world. And the projections are that this will be adopted faster than that.
I'm skipping you for a minute because I got a good last answer. I want to go last on this one, so we're going to go over here and then we're going to come back.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no contest for me. It was absolutely Vive, and unfortunately, that was my first experience, so it ruined the rest of them for me. But I would say, I mean, if you haven't had a chance to experience it, I mean, find a way. Our studio has one, and we're happy to host people anytime. But it really is that technology that makes you realize its potential and makes you realize that it's something very different than anything we've had today. And I think I had my brother was in the studio the last month, and he actually does a lot of research on brain activity and whatnot. And he identified something really, really simple in Vive that I think you take for granted, and the whole point is that you take it for granted, which is that when you first put on the headset and somebody hands you one of the controllers, you reach out to get it. And it seems so obvious at first that you would reach out and you would grab this controller, but when you actually think of all of the things that have to connect in order for you to reach out and grab a virtual item in this space that you suddenly inhabit, that was the moment when I, he said this is an entirely different thing. For me, it had such an impact because I didn't even think about it. And I think that's what makes it exciting. I mean, we've been playing around with Vive. We put it on my 4-year-old nephew, and he was playing that crazy job simulator game. And there was no moment of learning. You don't learn. I mean, I think when you look at any other technology, even the iPhone, there's a moment where there's a bit of you got to figure out how it works, despite how simple it is. I think that's what makes it so remarkable, and I think that's what. Again, there's nothing like Vive currently to bring that kind of experience to the table.
I totally agree. I mean, I've put people from 4 to 92 through it, and everybody gets it. Nobody misses the controllers. No, like zero. So, try that with a VCR.
That was the quote of the night so far, actually. Good for you, Tarny. That was really good. Eric, yours.
I'll also say the Vive, but I'm going to give a little bit of a different spin on it too. I actually use my Gear VR more than I do any other of my headsets. The reason, convenience. I take the West Coast Express in. I come, really far out from Maple Ridge every day. It's quite the commute. And I put my Gear VR on people's heads all the time. I show them on the train. People get excited about it. When I fly, and lately I've been flying a lot more. On the plane, I always watch a movie. I sit in a virtual theater. I've got a 3D movie. Whatever's latest and greatest on Blu-ray, and it's amazing, and it takes me actually out of being on the plane. I'm totally somewhere else. I'm relaxed, and I'm watching an amazing movie actually in 3D. So I find I get the Gear VR. I use it a lot more. It's a lot more convenient at times. I love my Vive. My Vive's amazing. It's very immersive, but sometimes it's not convenient for me to get it set up or bring it anywhere. So
your Vive on a plane doesn't work for you? No.
I've tried, and it was awkward, and I think I got hauled off. No, just kidding. But I do actually use my Gear VR a lot, and most people who just use it, they just kind of get it because I can just give them something to consume. It's a little bit like on the Vive, we put people through the Blue. First time through, I don't usually give them a game to play. I give them more of an experience to walk around and see stuff. And they're always blown away just by the level of quality and the immersion and the visuals in there. And they don't have to interact initially, and it's still really good for them. So with my Gear VR, I do the same thing. And the resolution on the Gear VR is actually really good still. It's pretty high comparatively that it's run on a cell phone and like an $80 headset in comparison to my $800 US HTC Vive with a $1,500 PC powering it. So there's a real price performance there. So although I love my my Vive, it's the most immersive experience I've ever had, I actually end up using my Gear VR a lot more often.
So my awesome super hipster answer is the HoloLens. Oh yeah. Who's tried the HoloLens, including the panel? Put your hand up. So that thing, like the first time I tried it, I was like, oh yeah. It didn't matter. It was like, oh, you have a shitty field of view and I can't see anything. It doesn't matter. And then I found Robot Raid. And Robot Raid lets robots attack my living room every night. And for 11 nights in a row, I have fought off the robot onslaught. And my mother and my father and my children and like honest to God, I've invited more people over in the last week than I have in the last year, and everyone who comes over says, wow, this feels weird on my head, and my head hurts, and these glasses don't work, and holy God, this is the future. This is unconditionally the future. So I find that really interesting. What I find more interesting is that, Kleenex is a brand that represents tissue, right? You can say, pass me a Kleenex, and everybody knows exactly what you mean, except that that's just a brand. In my own house, gear means VR. So, I live this weird life where I know about all these things, and my 3-year-old son and my 6-year-old daughter have got more time in VR than most people in this room, but they use the word gear to represent VR. But I don't think that's normal. I think the actual Kleenex to tissue of VR is Oculus, right? Everybody's like, oh, have you tried the Oculus? Do you know what Oculus? Blah, 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 blah. But when we went across this entire panel, nobody mentioned Oculus. So is Facebook screwed? That's my next question, literally to the panel. Is Facebook screwed because of the Vive? Like, nobody said that they love the Oculus. I just asked 4 of you. I asked 5 of us. How many people in the audience think that the Oculus is the best VR experience they've ever had? Hey, that was 0 hands. 0 hands.
Yeah, but
Sorry,
who
can I
thinks
just-
like a compact Nissan's the best car they've ever been in?
Oh.
But it doesn't mean they haven't sold a shit ton of them.
But the thing is,
Right,
could it
so-
be that the CV1 or the consumer version of the Oculus is literally not out there?
Does
That's
anybody have
probably why.
consumer Oculus? There we go.
Anybody have a consumer Vive? Sweet.
Well, I'll tell you. My opinion on it, I don't think so at all. Vive is absolutely, the most stunning experience I've had. But for me, Oculus is that in between, and the main reason is that, I can never imagine myself bringing a Vive home. I'm not about to put aside 10 feet by 10 feet of living room space for it. And so, when we're pitching and, some of the pitches we put out there now, they're actually all for Oculus. And we're projecting ahead to when touch is a much more common part of the piece of the puzzle. But the difference between one that doesn't do head tracking and one that does do head tracking for me is the fundamental leap between, and curious, something that kind of fills the role of a curiosity between, versus something that truly brings that immersive VR element. And so I love Oculus too. The experiences I've had in Oculus are great. You're comparing it to, like you say, it's the, would I prefer to drive a Ferrari? Absolutely. What can I afford to bring home? Not the Ferrari. And so that's why my preference for projects going forward is the Oculus, because it combines, it doesn't require the room scale, but it also brings, that sense of immersion almost at the same level as HTC. So.
Right before anybody else. That was very smooth. Right before anybody else jumps in on this question, and I want you to, but I want to describe something important that he talked about. So we had mobile VR, which creates this environment that you can look around. And then we have head tracking, which knows where you are, your head is at in that space. And then we have the full room scale VR, which knows where your body's at. And so these different platforms have got different steps of intimacy and different cost associated with that. And for those of us who are making VR, this is a fascinating argument, right? Daydream in their VR, Google in their Daydream in their VR, in their Cardboard, whatever it is. Millions of people have tried that. Even with my love of the HoloLens, unconditionally, the most immersive, like, oh, sorry, I disappeared for 3 days experience is the Vive. The Oculus is halfway between that, and we all have informed opinions, but very few of us could say that we are confident that we know which one of those finally connects with the mainstream audience.
I think there's another one we haven't touched on either, which is Sony. And who here has tried Sony, including the panel? So I think Sony's going to be a sleeper hit because it is damned impressive, and all you need is a PlayStation 4. And like Eric and I tried it at the same time, actually, for the first time, and we both were like, "Wow, that's like $350 or something like that." And you get 2 hands, full headset, hooks up good, and it's super solid, and it will come with the whole Sony PlayStation ecosystem. They're launching a new PlayStation this fall to go with it and things. It's again, I think something that's out there. sleeper hit. And I don't think Oculus is doomed. I think it's just, they're in early and they're a massive company, and Oculus is pretty solid. It's not the Ferrari. It's also not the mobile side. And I do think personally that they screwed up in not having the Oculus Touch stuff out. It drives me nuts. It's like Sega with this, like the Dreamcast and the CD, and it's like, no, dude, put it all out at once and make it good. Anyway.
It's interesting we brought up Sony, actually. I think the first time I ever felt presence was definitely the Crescent Bay, which was the one before the consumer version. And I think I've played more, this is not the right word, but I couldn't think of any other word for it, more traditional game experience, like Bullet Train, done by Epic Games and that was with the Oculus Touch and the 360-degree positional tracking. That was a lot of fun, actually. So I think I've had a more traditional, quote unquote, gamer experience on the Oculus, whereas on the Vive, it was a lot of fun, like Job Simulator, fantastic contraption, and mini golf, actually. That was a lot of fun as well, especially in a party. So I think from a more traditional gaming standpoint, I've definitely had more of that on the Oculus. I've also tried the Morpheus or the PlayStation VR, and but the games that I was trying at the time weren't the ones that they've announced since then. So which is a lot more, traditional console gaming. So I completely agree. I think it's going to be a very interesting what PlayStation VR is going to end up to be. It's probably going to be a sleeper hit.
I really think Oculus dropped the ball initially, but they're in for the long game anyway. They have lots of money, they got the time, they got the technology, they got the passion. PlayStation is going to kill it when it comes out. They've got the numbers, they've got the price point, they got a lot of great games. It launches and it's going to support 2 controllers with motion tracking and rumble support, so essentially haptic feedback right out of the gate. And so they've got a lot of good things going for them for a very good price point. The Move controllers are solid because they've been around since PlayStation 3. It's the same technology. They've got that manufacturing process down. Volumes are no problem for these guys. So they're going to push it out. They're thinking of couch play. So they're actually thinking about the person who's not in the headset as well. They want to have them involved. They're giving them a good screen. Oculus, what they launch with is a headset that's tracked. You can play standing or seated experience, and they come with an Xbox controller. That Xbox controller is not tracked. The PlayStation controller actually is tracked in virtual space because it's got the actual camera support. The controller's lit, so they're in a really good spot. What I actually find is, although I really like room scale, it's not really necessary for the other games I play. I don't move much when I play anyway. I take a couple steps one direction, a couple steps another direction. It's really more about the tracked controllers, the haptic feedback, and being able to like reach around and like grab things and duck under things and get involved. So I don't find I use my full room scale that often, and I've got a pretty big space dedicated to it. It's amazing when I do, but mostly it's the stuff that you see that Oculus is doing with the touch controllers when that comes out finally, and the PlayStation and Vive is already there and beyond. That's really going to change things.
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, essentially, as soon as you have 2 hand controllers, you have hands. And actually, who here has hands? Everybody does, and they know how to use them. And so, it's much easier to do than figuring out how to use a gamepad, which, none of us were born with.
No, and I think what I was following on that, I really do believe that Oculus can ride the coattails of the PlayStation in a lot of ways, because the biggest challenge right now for VR is content production and design methodologies. And if people become really proficient at kind of the more seated experience with hand controllers, that's only going to help developing the Oculus content down the road, and especially with tools like Unity, where it's almost gotten to the point where you just flip the switch and build for the different platforms. I do think HTC is going to run into some challenges there where, if you're designing the seated experience with hand controllers, you're targeting 2 different platforms, as opposed to the room scale, which I think is always going to have a little bit more of a challenge to kind of grab the majority of users.
Okay, we're going for a quicker number question. So one year you were at Thanksgiving with your family and you said, I finally beat Angry Birds. And to your shock, your uncle across the table from you knew what you were talking about. And he said, oh, I can't get past World 3. And you're like, oh my God, everybody's playing Angry Birds. And mobile had really, really, really happened. So what year's Thanksgiving dinner? Oh yeah, I'm asking you to call dates. And I realize you're all going to be wrong. I'm going to be wrong. We're predicting the future. We're not going to be right. But let's just do it. We're on a panel. It's fun. What year's Thanksgiving are you going to say, last weekend I was doing X in VR, and your weird uncle is going to be like, me too. What year does that happen? And first of all, before the panel answers this question, does anybody in the audience think that's not going to happen? Does anybody doubt that this is the, oh yeah, 1, 2, good, that's good. There should be more of you. The rest of you are sheep, but so are we, so it's good.
Visionary sheep.
Visionary sheep, yes. So what year is Thanksgiving? The year where your family's like, yeah, I played that too. Or I did that too, or I saw that too, or whatever it is.
Well, for me, it's kind of already happening because we've been evangelizing for a long time. But in terms of the wider, probably in around 2025 is my guess.
Oh, shit.
In about 10 years.
So most of my family, and even including brothers and sisters-in-law, are all in the entertainment industry in video games. So for us, it's probably like next year. I'd predict if it was a broader, like, family who isn't all doing this industry, probably, I actually think, I don't know, 2019.
I think one side of my family, you'd be probably talking 2022, 2025. The other side of the family, probably in about 1 to 2 years from now. They're much more into the entertainment, and so they're very interested in seeing 360 videos and stuff. So as soon as music, concerts, and live performances are in there, that's where they're going to be.
Yeah, I'm going to say 2020 as well. I think that to me looks, we're going to be seeing the second generation headsets coming out. We're going to solve a lot of these early problems, and I think that is when we'll see that kind of industry pick up.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
You made us pick dates. Pick a date.
Okay. I think that. So, do we all remember the Wii? Remember the Nintendo Wii? So the killer app of the Nintendo Wii, much like the killer app of the original Nintendo, was the content that shipped with it, right? They sent out Mario Brothers with Nintendo in 1986, and we all got hooked. And the killer app of the Wii, the only app that most people ever played, was Wii Bowling and Wii Tennis. And that came with the Wii. And I often think about VR in terms of Wii-esque adoption, right? Because that would be awesome. We would all make a lot of money, and it would be really good if we could see that. But the Wii wasn't that hard to set up. My mother could set up a Wii without a problem. My mother could not set up a Vive without a problem. I can't set up a Vive. I've got an IT guy at work, and I have to call him on a semi-regular basis and be like, dude, I don't know what to do. So I think we're a ways off from the room scale stuff. I think with what Google's doing with Daydream, I think that Samsung's handing out the headsets with their S7s. That's what they're doing, right? There's 400,000 of those that went out. I think most people in this room, maybe not with like that uncle, not your Luddite uncle, but I think most of you in 2000, let's get crazy. I think most of you in 2018 at Thanksgiving will be able to say, I tried this VR thing, and somebody at your Thanksgiving table will be like, me too. Did you get to the boss? It was crazy. It was crazy. So I'm early. I'm calling 2018.
My mom told me the other day that she's looking for better VR experiences because her cardboard experiences aren't good enough for her.
What do we see as the major hindrances to VR adoption? What is like the one thing where you're like, oh, if we don't get this right, we all just... So, for everybody who doesn't know, there's this been reoccurring theme in the VR ecosystem, which is don't piss in the well, don't poison the well. We all need VR to work so that we can all make a lot of money doing this. And if somebody goes out and ruins all of VR for everybody by having mass adoption on a terrible product, we're all dead in the water. Anything else that you're really worried about ruining VR and mass scale adoption, or do you think this is done?
I don't know about ruining it. I mean, in terms of hindrances, though, I absolutely think the hardware it's for geeks still. I mean, let's face it. Not everybody wants to wrap this thing on their head, and so I think that the first big breakthrough is going to come in the headsets that are easy to set up, don't require you to plug into something, and then have content immediately available. So I think that to me that's the major hindrance right now, is that the average person doesn't want to have a big thick cable plugging them into a $2,000 computer and then seal themselves off from the world in its entirety. So So not so much something that could kill it, but I definitely think that this first iteration is going to be very much about the early adopters, about people who really love the experience and want more of it. And it'll be the refinement of the hardware that's going to take it to the next level.
For me, I think it's twofold. One is form factor, which you're kind of speaking to. Form factor is still big, bulky, awkward. It's still not comfortable. No, nobody's doing it yet, but somebody will eventually, and I can't wait for that day. But two, actually, I think access. So what we found at CVR, the conference we ran just about a week ago, was everyone was asking where do they get cardboards from? Where can I find cardboards? Where can I find cardboards? And really, the only place you can find cardboards is like online, maybe at a PR promotion if there's a brand or something giving them away because they've built something for it at a meetup. So they're not very accessible for people. You may not know, but if you just go to Toys R Us, they have the ViewMaster available at Toys R Us. For about $30. I picked up one for the studio the other day. But most people don't know where to find one. And so you actually have to go and hunting for it. So the mass market out there are either getting it through things like the New York Times giveaway. McDonald's was doing a test over in Sweden where they were giving out with Happy Meals. Hopefully they do a larger test for that stuff. And so it's really up to brands and stuff to give those out. The other challenge with those things is what they're giving out is very low quality VR headsets. And so those, in theory, can be poisoning the well. They need to include good content with them and make sure they're not just putting something out for the sake of putting something out. They're putting out something that will still deliver a good enough experience that it won't drive customers away.
Yeah, I mean, to echo it, I look forward to when you can put a set of aviators on that are wirelessly connected to your smartphone, which is your computer. And,
What? Oh, everybody look. Everybody look.
There we go.
That's his VR headset. Legitimately.
This is a Hominid. That's how you pronounce it. And it folds up. It's pretty small. It's pretty cheap. It's not bad. It's not the best experience. You can probably pick it up for about $15. I always try and carry around some interesting small headsets around with me just to show off how convenient they can be for people to clip. This clips onto your phone just on the front and then turns it in and you just put it on your nose and look around.
No, and I mean, and that's kind of exactly it, right? And sunglasses that are with see-through lenses because they've now got the ability to have glass that you can see through, but then you can also turn into a fully opaque screen. So, you mentioned sort of, how when you can switch between real world or virtual world, get a good set of shades on, you can flip in and out anytime you want, and that's, I think that'll be one of those key items that pushes it forward. I think the biggest blocker as well, one that everyone's working on too, is kind of that. How do you make an experience good for everybody? And motion sickness is one of the things that comes up as well. It's actually pretty easy to make people feel queasy if you don't build the experience right. And I guess that comes actually from the sense of presence. And that's actually something we haven't really talked about. You mentioned presence, but I mean the word for, kind of being in
Who knows
virtual.
what presence means? Lift your hand up if you know what presence means.
Ooh, that's a very small number of people. Let's talk about presence for a
deep on
second.
presence,
So presence is essentially the word that we in the world of virtual reality use, so that when you are in virtual reality and you feel like you are present somewhere else. And so that's hence the word presence. And it's a very, very powerful thing. And so, when you're looking at a television screen or you don't feel like you're where you are looking at. When you look at your phone, you don't feel like you were there. And when you are frequently in certain, types of VR, you don't feel like you're there. When you're in a good experience, you feel like you were there. And let me tell you, when you come out of it, it is disorienting in some ways because you're like, I was just somewhere completely different and now I'm here. And that sense of presence is very powerful.
There's lots of stories of people accidentally putting the controller down on virtual tables, trying to lean on something virtually and falling down. These are all people that actually forget that they're actually in VR for a second and their brain forgets to trigger it.
Yeah, it was Christmas, but one of my uncles had the gear on and was underwater and he fell over because he'd been drinking. But
Yeah. I guess one very common presence example is if you were to look over the edge of the tall building, do your knees lock up? And that's what happened to me. Is that in the Crescent Bay demo, there was this one experience where you overlooking this big top, huge building, and I know that there is absolutely no reason why I can't take one step forward, but my brain wouldn't let me. The other thing was actually that there was the first time I felt like I wanted to reach up and touch a pillar in front of me. And I actually had to stop myself because it was kind of embarrassing. There was another dude in the room doing the demo. So those are the kinds of experience where you feel like, okay, this is real. Their brain is basically tricked. And I guess going back to the what we're worried about in terms of ruining experiences, I think I'm going to put a little bit of a spin on it and go. I think a lot of people are getting into VR right now for a lot of reasons, and we talked about it briefly before how content creation is still very hard. So I feel like we could get to a point where people or developers, content creators could get disheartened by how hard it is, and they give up because it could be very hard. It could be very hard to get everything working perfectly so your players don't get sick while having fun. It's very difficult to do, just as game development is very difficult to do, except that you now have to do it, in 360 degrees as opposed to just on the monitor. So there's quite a hurdle to go through for that one still. And that would be something that is a barrier to creating more content, which is key to adoption for VR.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it is hard. I think that I had mentioned the motion sickness, and it's an interesting one because essentially because you're in presence, your eyes are telling you one thing, but if your station tube system is telling you a different thing, your body has evolved to essentially say, oh, there's something wrong here. I've probably been poisoned. I should get sick now. And so big movement in VR that is different than what your body's feeling. Feels like you're going over here, but your body says, no, actually I'm sitting still. There's a number of things that can make you feel ill. And so everybody in the industry is working on how do we overcome that problem. I think the other thing that kind of came up was just the idea of if you feel funny with it on. So, again, people felt awkward with the first cell phones, and then people thought they looked like idiots. And obviously the glass holes thing, Google Glass, and that whole thing happened. So, there definitely will be a social acceptance aspect of that, and that'll kind of go in an inverse relationship with when the hardware looks less weird.
I'd say a big thing that also going to affect how you feel is frame rate, actually. So I am surprised at how much of our cycle is actually dedicated to improving performance. If you're not hitting 60 frames per second, even on a mobile phone, you're feeling ill, and you need a consistent 60 frames per second. In a cell phone, you split your view into two screens, and so actually you're doubling the amount of 3D data in there. So really, you're hitting a twice as much horsepower is needed to run that cell phone, and you need to run at 60 frames per second. So to optimize that has been a real challenge for a lot of our products. In some cases, it's 30% to 50% of our development time is actually just optimizations, cutting down draw calls, removing transparency. So surprising to us was the amount of time that goes into that, and that's something you can't underestimate.
Yeah, no, on the note of presence, it's worthwhile looking up Jesse Schell's talks on the subject if you've had a chance. Because his analysis of the I Expect You to Die game that they developed, and I saw him talk down at GDC this year, really in-depth analysis of how vital presence is, and more importantly, what things you can do to ruin it. And I think the main point he kind of kept coming back to is that it is a shift in game development because the focus is no longer on gameplay, it's on presence. Maintaining that sense of presence is so vital that everything else is secondary. And it's worth looking up what he's had to say on the topic too, because he's had a lot of really insightful blogs and articles that he's written.
So I've got time for one more question, and then I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds to make closing notes, whatever they want those to be. So my one question to everybody here, and I'm going to explain something to the audience in case anybody doesn't know, and that's the difference between 360 video and VR that we've talked about. So 360 video is incredible because YouTube and Facebook, the two biggest distribution platforms on earth, have absolutely profoundly and deeply got behind 360 video. I don't know how much time you spend watching video on Facebook, and it doesn't matter how much time you spend watching video on Facebook because the kids are doing it en masse. And the difference between 360 video and Facebook is this idea that you have two cameras recording both eyeballs, and then you can create a sense of depth, and then you have virtual reality versus 360 video, which is just I can see what's going on all around me, but I only have one lens in every direction. So my question to the panel is, in 5 years, will anybody be talking about 360 video at all, or is it the car phone of the cell phone? You know, like is it like the 2-year sort of industry?
No, I do think that there's a bit of a situation where it's kind of it's the easy thing to do now, and it's the obvious thing to map to VR. I don't think it'll disappear, but I also think that it doesn't really take advantage of what makes VR special.
I think it's probably going to evolve quite a bit in 5 years. The Lytro cameras, if you haven't heard about that, they're massive in the file size, and they do entire depth of field. So they record, as far as I understand, video in 360, but they've actually recorded the light in all the different angles, and so that gives you a lot of control over distance and around objects and stuff. Another interesting technology is a company called, I think they're called Oitoy. They have an app out on the Gear VR, and behind closed doors and some of the conferences they're showing it's a Batman demo. They have these super high resolution cube maps that they show that are stereoscopic, really high resolution images, but they've showed animation in some of these, and in some cases you can move through the scene. It's on a fixed point. I believe it's all pre-rendered, but it looks really good. So if they can bring a combination of that to video, I think you're going to have a lot more interesting videos that allow you to move throughout it. I think there was also a Star Wars demo, and I can't remember what that was on, where you can actually, it's not quite 360 video, but they've built out a whole town that you can move around from character to character. And I think 360 video may go, like the traditional sense of 360 video may go the way of the Dodo, but that doesn't mean you can't have narrative now, like the Gone series. That's a great one on that VR, if you haven't seen it. So they
Have you seen Giant?
Pardon me?
Have you seen Giant?
No.
Giant's pretty cool too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So the way Gone works is it's actually a little webisode, but there are little points during the video that you can go and explore nodes in different places during the video. So behind a door, around a corner, inside the car. So the 360 video becomes a little more interactive and has side stories to it. So I think it's just going to evolve and change. But right now the 360 videos are they're the easy thing to do, and everyone can get out there and make content, and so it's easy to consume. And there's some interesting stuff out there.
It was interesting. I was on a panel at the National Association of Broadcasters conference in Las Vegas on virtual reality, and I was invited down by Technicolor. We're kind of very much visual effects, and they come from the film side. You probably watch movies and everything. It always says Technicolor at the end because originally they were a film developing company. And so I was on a panel with all of the other people who are really approaching virtual reality from the film side, because a lot of us are really approaching it more from the game side. In Vancouver, big film industry, but not so much on the innovation side. We're more of a city that provides services to make great films, but a lot of that sort of the innovation happens in Los Angeles or in some cases in New York. And so it was interesting listening to them talk about that, because for them, they're absolutely diving very hard into building essentially film style experiences, or about adding bits of interactivity into that. So Giant, the one I mentioned, is a short film that they've created, or a short virtual experience, I guess, where they've actually done, it's mostly recorded with actors, but they actually did some volumetric capture of the space so that you actually have some head tracking inside the video. And so it enables you to get some perspective as you watch this story unfold. And it's quite compelling. So there's a lot of innovation, definitely, and Lytro cameras were the big topic of the day because they've just been announced as well. And I know some other software as well that's now capturing all the light rays. I think it's Lytro that then let you actually simulate any lens you want, because it's captured all of the light information, and so you can then adjust any of your field of view or focus or anything else after the fact. So you don't need to film with a lens to pick your camera style. So afterwards you can just adjust anything. And so a lot of innovation going on that side as well.
I think there are a couple of things to 360 video, quote unquote. Number one is it's probably one of the easiest thing and the most entry level thing, if you will, to show someone who is not necessarily a gamer, who may be put off by a controller. Even the hands are really helpful, but if they see that you're playing a game, that could be a barrier to some people. And the other thing is with 360 video, if there could be some really empathetic experiences, like the Syrian refugee crisis. There's some really very, very good journalism being done in this space right now. Or, for example, at the NAB, they're really looking at it as how do we create some really, really compelling narrative using this particular medium. But I do hope in 5 years that we're not really talking about 360 videos the way that we're talking about it now, that we would be talking about things like the Lytro, what the Lytro is able to do, the volumetric capturing, or what Project Tango, which is all about depth sensing and capturing all that stuff. like I would very much like to see that happen in the next few years, because now you can actually walk through a museum. You can actually walk through, a certain space, and you can actually take a look at, a sculpture or something like that. I've never been to the Louvre, for example, so it'd be great for me to see the Statue of David. And technology like that is just growing leaps and bounds, and that's actually a really exciting thing.
Even if you
for
go
me
to the
see.
Louvre, you can't see the Statue of David because of all the people in the way. So, watching it in VR would be really nice.
We are each going to get, there's 5 of us, and we get 1 minute total, so we get 12 seconds each to do any kind of wrap-up final thoughts. 12 seconds, starting with you.
Sure, I think so. VR is at the beginning of the hype curve, so everybody get ready for the crash. But it's the real deal, and you should get on the bandwagon.
I would say actually, although entertainment and games is a great application, I think businesses are going to see the biggest application initially. They've got the money to spend to innovate and try out new technologies and try and apply these things. It's just really trying to find the use cases for all these businesses that have been around for a long time and integrating it into their systems and business cycle.
On June 25th, I'm organizing a symposium on VR journalism. And if VR journalism sounds interesting to you, and it is to me, you should come find me after. I have 3 free tickets tonight, so if you're interested in VR journalism, come find me afterwards. That's my wrap-up.
I think from my perspective, the set of VR, AR, MR, all the terms are in some ways going to go away because they're going to be something that everybody is using, and essentially as the headsets, and I'm going to call them headsets, so just, this is going to start getting integrated into everybody's lives. And it's going to affect every industry in every way, because right now that feels very solitary. As soon as that gets cracked, it's not, and people talk about an isolating experience, it's not. It's actually a connecting experience. And that will change every industry. So think about how it's going to affect yours.
For a lot of people, it seems like VR is actually moving very fast, but in many ways it is actually not, because there are so many problems that we still need to figure out, like how do we keep somebody's attention on for more than 20, 30 minutes, or how do we get games that are actually playable beyond a few hours. So if you're getting into it now and you're coming across these challenges, there will come a point where there's an inflection point where everybody figures out how to solve these problems, and then it's going to explode. So the idea or the timing for everybody to get into it is now and not later.
Okay, so we're going to do 2 questions, exactly 2 questions for the audience. Before we start, we're going to do a round of applause for everybody because they put their time in tonight. Real applause. Come on, a little bit. Hey, you guys are okay. Okay, so we're going to do 2 questions, and I'm going to give those questions based on who literally pops out of their seat first, like jumps up. Boom! You 2 get the 2 questions, so you're first. I want this one.
Sure. Hello? Good? So virtual reality porn, is that going to be a driver of innovation, or is it just going to be tacked on to 3D video? Would love to see some thoughts.
Anybody else can jump in, but I'm touching this one first. So I legitimately have not tried VR porn, and I consider that, I'm not even kidding, I consider that a professional failure. You all know that the thing that drove the internet before Facebook, literally the thing that drove the internet, was porn. You know that the internet exists as it does today. The scale, the distribution, the Google, the search algorithms, everything is because of porn. VR porn is a massive thing. Your accountants will not get into VR until everybody has tried VR porn. And again, I have personally failed and professionally failed by not trying it yet. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's going to be a big thing. And it'll drive a lot of innovation. And I think it's going to drive a whole bunch of really weird stuff. And there's some crazy videos out there that are fusing VR porn with some of the teledildonics, as they call it, industries.
That was my favorite word of last year, teledildonics, kids.
And then sort of automated sex machines. So there's one of this crazy Japanese guy. It's just the most disturbing thing you've ever seen. Yeah,
I've seen that. It is disturbing.
It's very disturbing. Anyway, you can find it on your own.
Test. Test.
Anybody else want to jump on porn before we get that guy? All right. Dodge the bullet. You, sir. Somebody pass him a microphone or yell loudly. I'll repeat the question. So we're talking about poisoning the VR well that we've already brought up, and we're talking about patents and their ability to poison the VR well, and we're talking about who has the best VR patent portfolio so far, and how the ecosystem is going to handle this as a whole. I got nothing.
I'm no expert on this, but there's a couple things I've heard. One, I've heard Sony's got about 300 patents they haven't brought to market yet, and so that's something that's going to be coming out soon. They've been doing this for a long time, so they've got a lot of patents they're going to bring to bear, and everyone's going to get hit with those. And this I'm not 100% sure of, but I've actually heard that Apple has a patent for the ability to put a device, a smartphone into a device, and that device will trigger it to go into split screen. And I believe that's going to actually impact probably a lot of the mobile, if that's true. I don't know if that's true. But you're right. I think patents are going to be a big part of this. And at the end of the day, Sony, I think, is going to be probably the big winner on the patent side.
Anything else?
No real add other than I have watched that in certainly the video game space, patents have not had a major impact. And I think that that's been because people, even though they have gone and pursued patents in some cases, people haven't pursued them that aggressively, and people have mostly found ways to integrate or work together to continue to drive the industry forward. And so I'm optimistic that patents won't be the driving factor that causes this to happen, because I think there will be some pretty significant lashback against it if people are pursuing, especially like aggressive patent trolling and things like that. I think if people feel like it's a real innovation, that'll be fine. But I think there's going to be a lot of patent challenges that are actually going to do pretty well at standing up, because yes, there's aspects of VR that are new, but I think they're going to get challenged by a lot of the fact that some of these things people are trying to patent are bullshit, and I'm going to support that.
Well, no, I think taking it, even a less idealistic viewpoint, but I mean, I think the mobile market is really instructive in this case. I mean, everybody's suing everybody owes everybody else royalties. But really, if you look at it, every single Android phone that goes out there actually pays some money to Microsoft. But that has obviously, I mean, is anybody worried about the adoption rate of Android at this stage? I think that, the patents are going to play a role, but I think that if you look to the mobile market, what you're seeing is that people are using patents to kind of augment revenue streams, and they're not using them to fundamentally block what other companies are doing. And so I do think that I don't see it as a major hurdle, mainly because it's it is a poison pill. I think it would hurt everybody if you really put your foot down and held onto your patents tightly, because you're not going to create the ecosystem.
Great question, though.
Okay. There's 5 people on stage, plus my good friend Matt over there. I want you all to literally stand up and applaud for these 5 people on stage. Stand up. Come on, do it, stand up. Hey, for Facebook. Woohoo! Okay, thank you for your time. Matt, for you.
Don't go anywhere quite yet, just 2 seconds. Thank you to our panelists. Phenomenal discussion. Thanks, Mac, for getting everyone out of their seats at the end. Next event's on June 16th. The Talent Crunch Recruitment Success Stories, presented by Dorothy Keenan and Tim Swanson, hosted at Hootsuite. Thanks again to our board members, event organizers. Make sure to grab a drink at the bar and canapes by Foodie. Thank you again for coming. I'm Matt. See you next time. Thanks very much.